Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to the Bootcamp Blueprint, the place where personal trainers go to grow their bootcamp. I'm very excited this week because we've got a very special guest, one of the absolute leaders in the field. A little bit about this person. He's the National Fitness Manager for Fitness First Australia, which is one of the biggest gyms across Australia. He's responsible for driving the strategic direction of both the personal training and group fitness departments for the organisation, which means he oversees a department that includes over 2,500 fitness professionals. He's an international speaker and has delivered training to thousands of trainers globally. So let me introduce, without further ado, the one and only Mr. Michael Cunico. Michael, how are you?
I'm very well, Jono. Good morning to you and the listeners.
Awesome. Very excited to have you on board here, Michael. Michael, I like to start all my podcasts off with a quote or mantra that inspires you or fires you up. Have you got one for us?
Yeah, when you pop open, it was pretty straightforward, mate. It wasn't too complicated. And it just simply said, work hard, stay humble. Maybe doesn't sound like, based on your introduction, it sounds like I do all the work myself and, I'm there just ticking things over with 2,500 people working through the organisation, but it's definitely not like that. I've got a great team that I work with, both above me in terms of support and the team that I work with directly as well. But I feel I've got to remind myself of that, particularly the humility part in an industry which can be a little bit ego-driven at some times.
Did you say a little bit or?
Yeah, I'm trying to be a little bit diplomatic. It's election time in our country right now, so we'll see how we go.
Awesome. Well, hey, Michael, there's a couple of things I'd like to talk about today. The two paths that I want to go down. The first is your personal path, like being the National Fitness Manager for Fitness First Australia. There's not many more important roles in the fitness industry in Australia than that. So I'd love to hear that story about how you got to that position there. And then maybe on the back end of the podcast, if we can talk a little bit about that amazing presentation you did at URSA, which was essentially from club door to gym floor, a blueprint to increase personal training revenue. Is that cool with you? We cover those two things.
That sounds great, mate. If you want me to kick off with, I guess, a real brief, I don't want to bore you and your listeners too much with my personal story.
We love stories here, man. Take your time. We'd love to hear how you got there. Feel free to, what I recommend is just start wherever you want to start. And then if there's a point there where you think one of my listeners, a trainer, could benefit from that, where you're like, hey, here's a clear defining point in my story where I did this. So if you want to get ahead, hey, here are some recommendations I got for you. But I'm happy to throw the ball in your court, take as long as you want, go as quick as you want. Let us know your story there, Michael.
Yeah, no worries. So I guess the starting point was I was a wannabe full-time athlete. It feels like many years ago now, and it sort of is. But I was lucky enough to live at the Australian Institute of Sport for a couple of years on a scholarship with soccer or football, depending on your preference. And then out of that, I played full-time soccer in this country for a few years, and this was pre the A League, so the old National Soccer League. I had a couple of
Sydney Olympic fan, were you, or?
No, I was actually I played for Northern Spirit and Sydney United back in the heyday. But I had a couple of difficult health scares, I guess you could say. So I had the standard knee injury that pretty much every soccer player gets, which became a damaging injury than it was first thought to be, and I ended up having about a year off the game. And then also a few years after that, I had a sort of health scare that was a little bit more serious, involving cancer and some complications with that as well. So at around that time, I started thinking that if soccer's not going to be the thing that's going to make me my millions, I need to come up with a plan B. And you want to dive headfirst into the thing that you're really passionate about, but at the same time, there has to be a level of reality of what might happen if things don't go your way. So I did my course, My Cert 4, I did it by distance education probably about 20 years ago. So things have changed a little bit since then. Started working part-time as a PT while I was still playing full-time. Full-time isn't necessarily full-time. It's 1 or 2 sessions a week, a day, and then you've got a fair bit of free time. So then it just evolved. Started training clients outdoors a little bit. Took the plunge, which was a big deal for me at the time, to commit to a franchise at Fitness First, paying rent regularly, and so I get the nervousness that some of our guys have when they want to start with us.
Let us know.
And it just evolved from there.
Let us
it
know
became
about that.
apparent I wasn't going to be lining up against Barcelona and Juventus anytime soon. Well, I had an okay career as a young guy. The Institute of Sport was an incredible experience. I was lucky enough to play in Junior World Cups. So there's an under-17 World Soccer Cup and an under-20 World Soccer Cup. And I played in both of those. One was in Nigeria, which is a very interesting country. And the other one, where was the under-20 World Cup? You know what? I can't even remember. It was so long ago. And then when I actually had my sort of knee injury was it was in the camp before the Sydney 2000 Olympics. I would have been a bit of a long shot to make that squad because I would have been like a sort of an era younger than the main guys that were playing there. So if you know anything about football in this country, I was sort of 2 years younger than the main squad of players. But in that last camp is when I had my knee injury, and then things didn't work out for me. Probably not only based on that, but at some point you've also got to understand that if you want to play in the NBA but you're 5'10", you're gonna struggle. Doesn't mean you can't do it. Muggsy Bogues proved us all wrong there when he won the dunk competition many years ago, but there's a point where you've got to go, okay, maybe this isn't going to work out for me, and now what am I going to do about it? And that was the transition to the fitness industry, to be honest.
Awesome. Love it. Well, hey, that might even be a good point to interject there and give some tips for the listeners. So you were at the point there where, okay, you were doing some outdoor stuff. Then you're like, hey, I'm going to transition and work in the franchise model at Fitness First and pay some rent. Let us know about that. What were the fees? How did you overcome those fees? And how did that work out?
Well, John, I think even if we take a step back and we think about someone who is thinking about a career in the fitness industry or thinks they want to take a step into the industry, regardless of where it is, Fitness First, outdoor, run your own studio, the thing that I did, which I would consider other people doing, is it was a bit of a hobby. And I thought, look, if I'm really passionate about this and this is the direction I'm considering heading in, if I'm that passionate about it, then I'll make it work as a hobby and I'll do it in my spare time, and I'll invest time and energy outside of what for me at that point was playing soccer full time. And it allowed the sort of passion and the energy that I wanted to put into it evolve and grow over time. So there's probably some people thinking or listening to this podcast that are considering a plunge into the industry, or have done their course and are thinking about, okay, what's next for me? And that first step may be doing it as a very part-time gig in your down hours, because if you are that passionate and interested in it, you'll make the time for it, whether it's at 8 o'clock at night till 10 o'clock writing programs for some of your friends or colleagues, or getting up early in the morning and doing some study, or taking a few clients before you go to your, in inverted commas, real job. So that was an interesting time for me, because then I started to think, this is something I really enjoy doing and I want to do on a bit more of a full-time basis. And then I took the plunge.
Yes, love that. That's a good way to look at it. So if you're listening to this and you want to, maybe you've just finished your qualifications and you're like, oh, what do I do? Do I launch straight into something? Do I sit around and wait? A good way to start is, hey, do it on the outside hours of your real job. if you're enjoying it, you're like, hey, I love this, I'm passionate about it, then the logical next step is to be, all right, cool, how can I go all out and do it? So I love that there.
Mm.
So then let's move to the next part of your story there, Michael. So now you're working in a gym, you're working at Fitness First, you're paying rent. How's it going? It's obviously quite successful because we know where you are now, but let us know how that sort of journey went there.
Yeah, look, it wasn't. It's not a complicated thing in my head. I was enjoying what I was doing. I had a very my business was based around mornings because I needed the afternoons and the evenings free for training back at that point. And things were going quite well. I did think to myself though that as a PT, well, there's a couple of things. I'm capped on how many people I can sort of assist or train or help. So that was something that was sort of made me curious. And also, there's only so many 6 a.m. slots you've got in a week. And this was almost 20 years ago. So it was less common, like the concept of small group training wasn't really a thing. It was either PT or group exercise. So things have evolved a lot since then. But I was thinking to myself, how can I be a bit more, how can I spread myself a little bit more? And how can I try to influence more people? And at that point, there was a position available in one of our clubs, which is the PT manager or the PT support function. And I thought that would be quite cool. I can still do some clients on the side. I've got my soccer, which was still keeping me busy at most nights of the week. But then I can assist other trainers. And let's be honest, I was still a rookie at that point, so I probably wasn't changing too many trainers' lives or anything like that. But over the years, I started to get a lot of satisfaction out of helping trainers help their clients. And in my head, it was, wow, now if I've got 20 trainers that I'm working directly with, and they've got all their client bases, and I'm having an impact on those trainers, then I feel like I'm having a bigger impact. And it just grew from there, I guess, where we had roles that supported groups of clubs and then states and then of course the entire country. So that was my, I guess, journey through Fitness First. And I've always got to be conscious to take my Fitness First lens off at times, because we can all be just naturally influenced by the environment that we've been in. And I've been in this environment for many years now. So I try to be as pragmatic as I can and be as realistic with challenges that we face or my approach in the industry, because I do have to take that lens off and look at it through different eyes at times.
Yes, because did you say 20 years you've been with Fitness First there?
I've been with Fitness First for just on 17 quals and started sort of doing it ago.
17. So you started when you were 5. So you've obviously, been there most of your life there. So
Yeah, absolutely.
One quick question for you there, Michael, before we move on to the blueprint to increase personal training. I'm very curious. So you've obviously, along the lines, you've been a trainer at a gym, you've then been the head of that gym, you've then been obviously a regional manager, and the state manager, and then the national manager. You must see some common trends between the personal trainers that are successful and the personal trainers that are not. And a few ways this can go, but can you ever just see a trainer, work with them for a day or two, and then make up your mind, okay, this person's definitely going to make it, or this person's probably not going to make it unless they change a thing or two? Do you have, can you see, I'm just curious, is that something you can do?
Yeah. I mean, without stating the bleeding obvious, it's really interesting. So I'll give you an example. We have a workshop program through Fitness First, and we engage external workshop providers, and we run their programs, or we recommend their programs to our trainers, and the trainers can book directly in. Over the years, I've seen trainers really regularly book in for the practical workouts and the big movement patterns and building a bigger bench press and all these sorts of things. And those ones generally tend to get good attendance, which is great. But if you put on like a business style workshop or something that focuses on I guess the other 50% of running a franchise within Fitness First, that it doesn't tend to get the same engagement, which is a shame. And it's not necessarily that you have to be a business genius or guru to necessarily run a franchise within Fitness First, but uh, learning some of the skills in that area in terms of financial planning, financial management, just the tracking of sessions and building a direct debit base rather than cash payments with your clientele. Some of those real simple things can sometimes be forgotten. But I guess to come back to your question directly and without stating the real obvious, the practical skills can all be taught. You'll learn that by osmosis the longer you're in the industry and you're engaging with other trainers. But it's that age old balance between will and skill. So generally trainers will come in really high will, pretty low skill, because that's just natural in any vocation. You're just not that good at it when you first start. But over the years, as you build knowledge and experience, then obviously you naturally get better at something. But it's pretty quick to work out, does this trainer have a big smile on their face every time I see them? Are they engaging people just for the sake of engaging people? You can pick that up pretty quickly. And I feel that if that side of your game is in the right space and your headspace is in the right space, i.e. nothing's hand given to you in any new business, whether it's at Fitness First or in a studio down the road or with a different brand, there sometimes is a shift of trainers, their expectations on how to be successful almost shifts, that they get more experience, but they don't feel like they've got to put the hard work in or just do those really simple things, smiling at a member as they walk past and saying good morning. And I know that sounds cliched and cheesy, and Mick, that's the stupidest words of advice I've ever heard. But all you have to do is look at health clubs and you see members walking past staff all the time. So I don't know if that directly answers your question, but those real basic human skills almost, sometimes are almost exercise, or you've got a little bit of knee valgus there in your squat, so let's do all the and the member just wants to have a workout. And I guess that was it was getting back to member engagement, building relationships, trying to elicit behavior change as opposed to, let's just get you on the gym floor and slam with a workout. That's important, and there's some really cool stuff we can sometimes forget about.
Yes, I love that. There were so many good bits of information there, Michael. I want to break that down for the listeners because, just so much good bits of information. Let me break this down. I was taking notes so I didn't forget all of that. So I'm going to summarize what Michael said there. And it's great to always upskill and be a better trainer. That's awesome. But if you want to be a successful franchisee, you need to also have those business skills as well. And that's whether you're at Fitness First, whether you're running your own outdoor boot camp, whether you're training people online, whatever it may be, you need to have that business side of things as well. And one of the good things actually about being at a place like Fitness First is some of that is even handled in terms of like the lead generation. Like if you work at a Fitness First, great, you've got maybe a couple thousand members there that you can, already actually approach to. Whereas if you're out on your own, you don't have that. So that's a little bit tougher. But I like that point there. I also like the basic people skills or even just the will. And I feel like, to summarize, like if you really love what you do and you really want to be a good personal trainer, you're going to find a way. Even if your technical skills suck at the start, if you really like what you do, you're passionate about it, you're going to get better by upskilling and being in the industry and speaking to other trainers. But if you don't have that, you're not really going to get ahead no matter how good your technical skills are. And I love the point on, like, it was mainly a personal responsibility point. And you see this very common in the fitness industry, or any industry really. Like, you're in charge of your own success, right? If you think you're going to get a handout from somebody else, it's not going to happen. And I don't want to dive too much into this because it can get a controversial topic, right? But there's always it's the whole rent topic, right? There's a lot of people that are like, oh, why would I pay $300 a week rent or whatever it is? And, the gym doesn't do anything. Not saying that's the fitness first, but just the mentality in general, right? And I'm just like, man, for me, that's a steal. Like, if you can just pay an amount like $300 and you get access to all these facilities and all these members and the front desk and support, like, that's a steal. And I feel there's sort of two ways you can look at it, right? It's either like, oh man, like, I'm in such a bad situation because I've got to do this, or it's like, man, I've got all this opportunity. How can I use it? So I love that there. I'd like to move on from there, Michael. If we could talk a little bit now about your philosophy with the club door to gym floor, the blueprint to increase personal training revenue. What can you let us know there?
Yeah, just a few things, man. I'll take one really small track back because I love the way you summarise where we were going there, and you're right. Like, I have the same sort of philosophy in terms of PTs paying rent. $300-$400. It's a lot of money. It is, particularly if you're still new to the industry and you're still learning your craft. If you're looking to lease commercial space, then all of a sudden $400 a week looks like a steal. But if you haven't explored that, or if you're unaware of that, then I can see why that can be a little bit of a barrier. But some of the best trainers arguably in this country have been on that journey. And it's really interesting when you talk to them. There's two examples in Sydney. Tony Battaji, who some of your listeners may be familiar with, arguably one of the smartest people in our industry in this country. He went on that journey. He was a trainer of fitness first, stepped away many years ago and started his own studio. And if you speak to him, that was a really challenging period for him, because all of a sudden he's gone from being a trainer paying flat amount of rent to now he's the trainer, he's the receptionist, he's the cleaner, he's the everything. And all of a sudden his fixed costs have gone through the roof because he's renting a whole commercial place. Plus he's got equipment, he's got to fix that equipment, etc., etc. And I know Cato Rutherford, who was one of our trainers out at George Street, who shifted away a few years ago. And both of these guys are still close to our business in terms of a friendship and a relationship. Had the same sort of challenges where all of a sudden I've got a commercial property I need to look after. So it just depends on, again, what lens you're looking at it through. And I don't think there's a right or a wrong. I think there's some trainers in our business who will probably be trainers with us for 20, 30 years because they don't want the overhead of that fixed commercial property and they're happy paying their fixed flat rate. However, like you said, we don't want to harp on that for too long. In terms of shifting to some of the things that we spoke about in Ursa a few weeks ago. So it was a slightly different take on that topic, and I framed it up when I started the presentation, because it wasn't going through sales funnels and maximizing your ROI on how many people you're speaking to, etc., etc. I would say the first 2/3 of the presentation were focused on not so much basic human skills, but maybe some of the things we just don't think about. So, and particularly in the world with social media is everywhere. How you and who you speak to, whether it's online or even face to face, even though online is becoming such a big platform for the fitness industry now. And if you ask me, has played a big part in fueling some of the growth and the awareness in the industry. And not all of it's great, and I sort of take that on as well, but it has played a huge part regardless of which way you look at it. So personal branding and the impact of that. And we spoke about two different examples as part of that session. And obviously I was in the States, and so I used two people that sort of, I would argue, very well known in the US, and one was Mr. Trump, who, whether you like it or not, has really leveraged his personal brand, you could argue, to the whole, almost on the planet.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side, you've got the Jenner sister, who, it was all in the press sort of around the time I was there, around her being the youngest billionaire, and that she's literally done that via a social platform and a personal branding. And the phrase personal branding has only been around for about 20 years, and it's been leveraged through social media. But just look how powerful it is. It's incredibly powerful, and those two people have leveraged it to the tilt, I guess you could say. So we spent a lot of time talking around that. And then we shifted around a little bit, but the other area we did spend a lot of time talking about was also trying to elicit behavior change. So I'm not sure how much you want to go in and unpack that, but we did spend a fair bit of time on getting that from the people we're engaging with as well.
Yes. All right. Well, let's summarize those three, and then maybe we'll go your biggest takeaway on the behavior change. So the three takeaways that I got there from Michael was the personal branding. And you look at people like Donald Trump, he got to like the most powerful position in the world by using his personal branding. You've got Kylie Jenner, I think it is. I don't even know what she does, but I know she makes a post on Instagram and then 10 minutes later the stores are out of lipstick, So that's the power of that's the power of personal branding. And then the third one was behavioral change. So I really like that, because really that's the secret to success, I believe, in health and fitness. Like, you can only help someone so much in a 30-minute PT session, right? But if you can change their behavior, that's when it's life-changing. So maybe if you just want to run us through your biggest takeaway from that, Michael, and then we'll finish up.
Yeah. So I literally remember maybe 10, 12 years ago running personal training induction programs and training programs. And part of our philosophy back then was, you need to tell your new client or member exactly what they need to do to achieve their results. Through the last in more recent times, and looking at I guess the research on behavior change, and it's generally behavior change around people with addictions like alcohol and drugs, etc. And that's where you can find real research on how to help people make a change. The idea or the concept of telling people what to do, that doesn't work. If it was that easy, then everyone would be walking around with a six-pack, and there'd be no dramas in terms of health and obesity, etc., etc. But getting behavior change is a shared journey. That member or that client needs to play a part in building the plan or the structure. They need to have ownership over it. No one likes to be told what to do. That goes back to the very core of us as human beings. You're 5 years old, your mum tells you to clean your room, and you try to do everything you can to avoid it. We just don't want to be directed on how to live our lives. But if we can play a part and be involved in the journey of what we need to do, then our chances of long-term behavior change will increase. Still doesn't mean it's going to happen the first time. In fact, I'd have to dig out the research to give you the exacts, but I'm pretty sure in the world of serious behavior change around alcohol and drugs, etc., people generally need about 7 goes at it. So even if people's efforts in behavior change around changing nutrition and diet plans and exercise, even if that's a little bit less than that, let's call it 3, 4, or 5, imagine putting yourself in the shoes of someone who's had a crack at this before, and they've walked into this intimidating environment before and it didn't work. What's running through their head? How scared are they? How nervous are they about this whole process? And then sitting in front of them is the picture of health, potentially male, female, looks great. These things can sometimes come naturally to them, or if they don't, there's a perception that it does. And and taking them on this journey, we forget how big this is for that person. So working through how to get them to buy into the journey you're trying to take them on, how to get them to be involved in the planning and the building of it was also a big part of what we talked about in this presentation. And even unpacking that, in a 20 or 30 minute section of a presentation is probably too short. For any of the listeners, Paul Taylor, who's well known in our industry in Australia, speaks a lot about this and is probably one of the leading experts, not only in our country, but globally. And I've been fortunate enough to do a little bit of work with him over the years, and hearing some of the stuff and the research that he talks about, it's incredible.
Yes, I love that. I'm a huge fan of that myself. And as Michael mentioned, that's quite a big topic there. So what I would encourage to do, as Michael did as well, is go out and do some research on it. He's mentioned Paul Taylor. That could be a good place to start. And the more you can research on that, the better your results your clients are going to have. So I love that. Michael, we're coming to the end of the podcast here. I like to finish all my podcasts off with the same question. So you're obviously a mentor for thousands of trainers out there. There's the Fitness First PTs, the Fitness First group fitness instructors, all the people you impact when you talk at the Filexes and the URSAs. Two questions here. A, who are your mentors? And then B, you've already mentioned Paul Taylor. Who would you recommend that my listeners follow, or books that they read, or podcasts that they listen to, or presentations they see at Filex, apart from your own, because yours is obviously the one they're going to go to. But what can you tell us there?
Yeah, okay. It's really hard to distill, I guess, your influences to a few people. I've been fortunate enough to work with some incredible people in my years at Fitness First. And one of the benefits of working in a large organization is, and separate to being a standalone operator, regardless of where you are, is you get to engage with a whole heap of different people. So I've been fortunate enough to work with a gentleman called Domdos Remedios, who was in my role many, many moons ago, who runs PT Academy. Another gentleman called Rob Hale, who was also in my role many moons ago and is now the GM of Orange Theory.
Oh, okay.
Our recent sort of heads of Fitness First, Pete Manuel, Dave Atchison. It's hard probably for some people to get access to those guys, because that was a little bit by luck, I guess, to be honest. In terms of the broader fitness industry, there's some really great things happening in our industry locally in terms of raising the bar and providing more development opportunities, etc. I've mentioned Paul Taylor, great in the world of how the brain reacts to exercise and the psychology of exercise. Tony Battaglio's is probably far and away the smartest, in inverted commas, personal trainer in our country, if you like. And they're probably the main guys locally. There's no shortage of information, and all you need to do is Google weight loss or fat loss or strength training, and you're going to get tons of it. What is interesting right now is there seems to be this real push towards like a science approach or a science-based approach, which has been in conflict to, or in the opposite to sort of the more bro science that maybe we grew up with, reading T Nation or before the internet. But just being in the trenches and building your experience through working with people, there's only so far some research will take you. You just need to have some experience on the gym floor or working with people. And you can only do that if you are genuinely passionate about it. A lot of people say they're passionate about a lot of things, but the reality is that when it comes to the crunch, it doesn't always work out that way. So, yeah, I don't know if that directly answers your question. We sort of bounced around there a little bit. In terms of podcasts, I've got a few podcasts that I really enjoy listening to, but not necessarily because they're PT or fitness focused necessarily. What I tend to do is I tend to look for people who I guess respect in the industry globally, and I'll search podcasts for them specifically, as opposed to a one-stop shop podcast. So in the world of strength and conditioning, you've got Brad Schoenfeld, pretty popular at the moment, Brett Contreras, a little bit more, maybe not so much controversial, but guys that have quite strong opinions. Nick Tominello, Ben Bruno, Michael Boyle, Eric Cressy. So a lot of guys based over in North America who I think are doing some really interesting things. And a podcast that I'm really enjoying at the moment, which has nothing to do with fitness, but it does have a little bit to do with business. It's a podcast called Business Wars. Okay. And the reason I found this podcast was because I'm really into being in the fitness industry, so that comes with the territory. I love sneakers. And I found a podcast that basically told the story of Adidas versus Nike. And I found that really interesting. And then this suite of podcasts for this Business Wars podcast was all sorts of things. It was Adidas versus Nike. It was Coke versus Pepsi. Nintendo versus Sega, I think it might have been. Red Bull versus Monster. Yeah. So it's been really interesting, and hearing the journey of some of these brands battle it out. I've just found quite interesting from not only from a personal perspective, but just from a business perspective as well. So if you're into that sort of thing, it might be one that some of your listeners might enjoy.
Yes, I'm going to download that. I love those. My favorite one is I haven't heard of it before, but I like the idea. My favorite one, and I hope they've got one, is the Apple versus Microsoft. Surely that's on there, right?
There is, yes. I'm pretty sure there is. There's a couple. There's like eBay versus PayPal. Is it Apple, Microsoft? I can't remember, but there's a browser one. So,
yes, I would love that. Chrome versus Explorer or something.
Yeah, something like that. So it's a really interesting podcast, and they're short and sharp, 25 minutes. A couple of episodes in each series, and I found it really, really interesting.
Yes, well, thank you. I'm definitely going to listen to that. So if you're listening and you're into that sort of stuff, I recommend the same. But hey, Michael, that's all we've got time for today. Am I right in saying if anyone wants to keep an eye on what you're up to, your best bet is probably Instagram? You'll get an update once every 6 months from Michael on there. So that's probably the best chance you've got. And it's just at Michael Cunico.
Yeah, I'm not the poster child for updating my sort of Instagram account. I like to think I keep myself busy just with I guess my day-to-day work. And speaking of, that might sound weird because I mentioned that's not my number one priority right now. It's my priority is my work at Fitness First and what we're doing there. And I am I think I put a goal there once personally of being a little bit more, a little bit better at updating it. That might have to wait till maybe 2020. We'll see how we go. But yeah, by all means, at Michael Cunico, and hopefully I get a little bit better at updating that spot.
Easy. I'll send you over a nice photo for this episode here in the description and everything. So there'll be your post done for the year.
That would be great. I appreciate that, John.
Hey, just before I leave you to it, Michael, is there anything you wanted to finish up with? Anything I should have asked you but forgot, or anything you want to finish up with?
No, look, I think we covered a bit of ground in a pretty short time. I think that the one thing might be what we just spoke about then is if there are people listening that are working as trainers or are considering working with trainers, you really quickly work out an industry that you become a lot more than a personal trainer. You've got clients that are confiding in you and potentially seeing you more than they see some of their best friends if they're seeing you 2 or 3 times a week. So you're going to have to change hats a lot. But that last piece we spoke about around creating behavior change, that's a real thing. That's what we're there to do. You can have the greatest program in the world built, ready to be delivered to a client. But if they're not invested in the direction you're trying to take them in, then that might be a fairly short-term relationship. And so I'd encourage, your listeners, to look into that. Google searches, things such as motivational interviewing. We looked at an approach called the OARS approach, OARS, and they should be able to find some really good content around that.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you very much for your time there, Michael.
Thank you, John.